Oh, how you doing? My name is Jermaine Watson. I am. I decided what I wanted to do was I wanted to bring you something different, something that I haven't been doing lately. So some of you have seen me on a podcast called Trekkers Delight. Others have seen me on a podcast called Talk That Stuff. On Trekkers Delight, we're talking about Star Trek, right? And I have, lots of other friends, people who love Star Trek. We talk about that. Also, I have a friend of mine, Michelle. She and we talk about Big Brother. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to merge the two, right? I wanted to give Big Brother its space. So Big Brother is we're going to keep that with Talk That Stuff, and Star Trek going to give it its own space with Trekkers Delight. But I felt like there was so many other things that I had of interest, and I just wanted to talk about it. All right. So this is the first recording of Fantasy is Reality. What I was trying to do was I was trying to schedule tapings with friends and others that I knew that had an interest in talking about these things, but our schedules never lined up. Or they were just afraid. Whatever the case might be, I just said, you know what, forget it. I'm going to do it by myself. So, like I said, this is called Fantasy is Reality. So we're going to talk about all things, well, not all things fantasy, just the things that I like, and not all reality, just the things that I like. And I hope I do it justice. All right. So, with that being said, the first taping, I don't know if this is going to be the first thing that airs, but the first taping is going to be about House of Dragons, episode 1, the Heirs of the Dragon. And so what I'm going to attempt to do is I'm going to talk about the episode, and then interspersed, I'm going to kind of like give my opinion about what it is that I'm seeing. All right. So the episode starts off with King Jaehaerys. He's king of Westeros, and he's also over House Targaryen. Um, Two of his sons have already passed away. They've died. And so what he does is he decides to call a great council. It's the great council of people of all the 7 houses of Westeros. So they come in, and what they want to do is or what he's tasked them with doing is choosing his heir, his successor. And the reason he wants to do that is because he knows several things. And we learned something at the end of the episode. But one thing that he, I guess, could say publicly is what he doesn't want his house, the House of Targaryen, to kind of implode in some sort of civil war. So to stave that, what he does is he calls all of these noblemen, and they basically elect, kind of like, think a pope. They go in, they vote, and they come out, and then there's the next pope. In this particular case, because he has no heir, he's trying to decide who would be his successor. And there are several people who could be his successor. But they whittle it down to 2 people. One is his oldest living descendant, who happens to be a woman. And the next is his oldest living male descendant. Of course, one is a prince, one is a princess. No surprise, what they chose was the male descendant. And so one thing that I thought was noteworthy when we were looking at these different people, these different groups of people. First, the princess, his oldest living descendant, she was married to, and of course, they have the white hair. We're talking about the Targaryens, right? She's married to a black man. Not only does he have white hair, but his hair is in locks. All right. So I was like, wait, what? Huh? Who? What is going on? Like, I was here for it. Like, it was a huge surprise, and I didn't see it coming at all. But I was here for it. Oh, so here for it. Prince Viserys, uh, his wife, was pregnant. And it was almost as if, oh, we're going to show it. The issue here is the fact that we don't have an heir. But guess what? My wife, she's showing and proving that she can pop out kids, and she's pregnant. All right. And so, of course, they choose Viserys. Viserys is going to be the king. And almost as soon as that happens, they they kind of speed things up 9 years into the reign of King Viserys. And what we see is basically that that his wife is pregnant again. But before then, we learn that House Targaryen currently has 10 dragons. Rhaenyra, the king's daughter, arrives to the city and on one of the dragons. And as soon as she arrives in the city, what she does is she goes to see her mother. Her mother, as I said, is pregnant again. But this time, her pregnancy is not going that well. It's actually a hard pregnancy for her. But Rhaenyra is joined by one of her friends who happens to be the king's hand. Her name is Alicent. Now she's going to become important a little later. At the time, I'm thinking, why are they even showing her? Like, it's not necessary. It's like these things are not necessary. But everything that you see on the screen or even a play, everything that you see is important. Okay. When she sees her mother reminds her that the role of a woman, such as she, the role of a woman is to provide kids. That is the greatest role. And she also says, basically in her own way, I know this is not what you want. It's not what I want. But this is the reality of the situation. So later we move to the King's Privy Council. And in the King's Privy Council, we see his cousin's husband, the black man with the locks. He's on the Privy Council. And, first thing that I think is, why have you not killed him? That's the first thing that I thought. Like, why have you not killed him? This is someone who has claim to the throne. Well, maybe not him, but definitely his cousin. But, that's not what we learn a little bit later, that he's above all of that. All right. So Lord Corlys, who is his cousin's husband, is on the Privy Council. And he has a concern for what is considered or called the free cities. They're obviously part of the kingdom. Okay. But what they're learning, or what he's learning, is that the free cities, they have created something called a triarchy. And Lord Corlys is very, very suspicious of what it is that they're doing. So much so that he gathers more information, and he learns that what they're trying to do, I guess in the short term, is they are trying to rid themselves of pirates. Which, I mean, that's a good thing, right? To which the king says, I fail to see your point. Like, why is this necessarily a bad thing? It's not. Right? It's not really a bad thing. Just then, Rhaenyra, she walks in. We learn that she is the cupbearer for the king. And of course, the subject changes. It changes to the king's brother. The king's brother is Prince Daemon. We learn maybe a little later that Prince Daemon is, without an heir, is in line to the throne after King Viserys. Well, members of the Privy Council, they want Prince Daemon to take his place at the Privy Council. And so they ask, why is he not here? And we also learn that the hand of the king, Otto Hightower, is not too keen on Prince Daemon. But we kind of go back to Lord Corlys and his concerns over the free cities, and the law, the king's hand, Hightower, you could tell like he's not here for that. Like he doesn't want to entertain that at all. Doesn't want to entertain it. The king talks instead about the upcoming tournament, which they're going to have. And, I forget exactly what it's called, but but you have two people who are on a horse. One with this long, I don't know, I want to call it a javelin. I don't know exactly what it's called. I probably should have looked it up, but look, and, of course, they're all, in their knight regalia, wearing, the medals, and they're both trying to hit each other until I guess one falls off the horse or potentially dies. Anyway, but that tournament is arranged so that basically they could say, hey, the king has a son, an heir apparent. Even though he has a daughter who's alive, he doesn't have an heir because, at this particular point in time, an heir is supposed to be a male. He informs the Privy Council, look, hey, no one knows whether or not my wife is going to have a male or whether I'm going to have a son or a daughter. No one knows this, right? But I believe in my soul that I'm going to have a son. Rhaenyra learns, and also, by the way, what ends up happening is his daughter is learning that her father doesn't think of her as an heir, only thinks of a potential son as an heir, almost to say as if she's not good enough. And you can tell in the way that the camera hits her face and her reaction that this is not something that she really cares to hear. All right. So Rhaenyra learns that her uncle Daemon, the prince, has arrived into the city, and so of course she goes to see him. No one knows that he's there, but she has been told, and so she goes to see him. And in that encounter, we learn several things about the interaction between the two of them. Rhaenyra, from my impression, thinks of him as more than just an uncle. He's kind of like a mentor to her. And if I had to guess anything, I would say Daemon is the father she wished she had. He talks to her. First of all, he talks in that language. I forgot the name of the language, but he talks to her in that language. They talk to each other in that language. Basically, the language that is used whenever they're talking to the dragons. So they have a connection there. You also see that in that brief moment, like that's basically the first time that we see Prince Daemon. Basically the first time. But you see that the two of them have a connection, they have a bond, they have similar traits. Free-spirited. And if you think about it, she is for all intents and purposes, she's the oldest child of the king. She should be, right? She should be the queen, the heir apparent, but she's not. And if you think about it from Daemon's perspective, he is the second child. He won't be the king. It's almost like they're both in waiting. They're both in waiting, right? He's in waiting to the brother. She is in waiting to this brother that up till now does not exist. Okay, so there's like some commonality that they have, that it's on a deeper level, if you will. All right. And I actually like the interaction that the two of them have. I like that. Even the personalities that they have. It's like they understand each other. It really is. It's like they understand each other. All right. So after this, they cut to the king. The king has a cut on his back, and basically what we learn is in order to cure that, and he got the cut from the throne, from the Iron Throne, and so it has pus on it. It's infected, and so they want to cauterize it. And basically, I had to look this up because I didn't know what it meant to cauterize it. But anyway, they applied something on, I guess, his tissue, his skin, so that it could kill the infection. All right. So later again, they cut to the queen. The queen is having, as I said before, she's having a difficult pregnancy. Um, Damon leads the city watchmen into the city to basically maim and kill criminals. All right, so he decides, he's going to go into the city and he's going to get rid of all the unwanted people in the city. Now, remember, this is prior to the tournament, and later his justification for doing this is to ensure that all these noblemen are not accosted by all of these rapers, murderers, thieves, and all types of elements that are unwanted, right? But what he does with his night watchman is they go into, and as I said, they go in and they maim, right? They cut off people's hands, people who were said to have been stealing. They cut off the genitals, basically the balls of a guy who was said to be a rapist. And they showed that, and I was like, is that really what it looks like? And I was like, where is the I was looking for it. I couldn't see it. But it was wild to see. Um, um, but later, basically the next day, the Privy Council, they're talking to the king. They're giving him an update. And when I say the Privy Council, I'm really talking about the king's hand. He's not pleased by this. He's not pleased by this at all. All right. And so basically, Carlos, however, now this Carlos again, Lord Carlos, is the king's cousin's husband. Whatever. The husband of the king's cousin. Okay. He shows his support for Damon. And I thought in that moment that was a bold move. It was clear to him, Lord Carlos, it was clear to him that he was going to lose. He was going to lose his vote. I mean, they've already established that the hand gets what he wants on the Privy Council. He gets what he wants. He knows how to talk to the king. He knows how to persuade him in most matters. In most matters, the only matter that he can't clearly persuade him on is when it comes to his brother. Right? The king is loyal to a fault when it comes to his brother. So, as I said, Carlos shows his not his allegiance, but he says, "Nah, look, we told him that he would be over the Night's Watchman. In order for the Night's Watchman to protect the king and the city, they need to be feared, right? And what's wrong with cleaning up bad elements?" But clearly, there's still tension between the hand and Damon. Clear tension. So much so that as they spar, the hand reminds Damon of his marriage. Yeah, he reminds the prince of his marriage, and that he should be with his wife. And Damon responds by basically saying, "You can have her." You can have her. She's ugly. You can have her. If you want her. Your wife just died. I know you need. And at that point, the hand, he's offended, right? So he stands, and of course, the king comes to his defense. Now, in that particular situation, I don't know a whole lot about kings and queens and monarchs and noblemen and all that other good stuff. But from what I understand, if the heir apparent says something, okay, he says something. That is not for you to touch, right? And from what I saw, I didn't get the impression that the hand was in a position to really, really defend himself or even go on the offensive when it comes to Damon. I didn't get that impression at all. So he was really just acting out of, I don't know, pride or, machismo, whatever you want to call it. And so, of course, the king comes to his defense and is like, hey, that's what my brother does. Why do you always send him to, to that? Basically, trying to get him to calm down. And of course, he calms down. He remembers his place. He remembers his place, after all. And to that, Damon just kind of smirked. He was like, "Whatever I said, what I said. What you gonna do about it?" But the king continues to offer his support to his brother. He's like, nah, that's my brother, right? So later Damon goes to a whorehouse. He's having his way with a woman. He like you see it, he's having his way with a woman. But he can't finish. So clearly, in that moment, we realize that this is not just a woman, right? This is a woman that he actually knows, because she says, basically, I know you've got a lot on your mind, right? I need you to remember that you're still the king's brother. He needs you. That's a lot for a common whore to know, right? So it tells me that he has at least some great affection for this woman who is a quote unquote a whore, right? And she reminds him, he can't replace you. So later at the tournament, the king announces Queen Emma's has gone into labor. At the tournament, we learn some people are openly favoring Princess Rhaena, whatever, the cousin of Viserys. And of course, it was a Baratheon. All they want to do is fight. That's all they want to do is fight. But the Baratheon happens to be the cousin of Rhaenys, whatever her name is. During that tournament, Rhaenyra, those names are too close. I don't know why they did that. Rhaenyra, she basically spots Criston Cole. And Criston Cole is a fighter. He is a commoner. And his mother was the ward of a lord such and such. But he's a fighter. Clearly, he's a fighter. And she's impressed by that. Yeah. I was about to jump to what happened later, but I decided I wanted to go in order. So they switch back to the queen. The queen is basically about to lose her daughter. Not her daughter. She was about to lose her son. She's in breach. And so, basically the doctors come to the king and they're like, hey, look, you have a decision. Do you want to save the life of the mother? Or do you want to save the life of the child? He chose the child. He believes that this child is going to be a male. She dies in a, fairly brutal way. They cut her open. They show them actually cutting her open after, we see her bleeding. Of course, there are sheets over her, but we know. But they show the scene where they cut her open and she's pleading for her life. No, don't do this. Don't do this. He chose the baby over her. And so we think, okay, he has a son, because it was a son. It was a son that was born. And when I tell you the very next scene that they cut to, we cut to what we think is the burial of the wife. And maybe 10 seconds later, they slowly pan to the child. The child died as well. So at the funeral, Rhaenyra is expected to have her dragon, Crixus, burn the bodies. You could see the emotion on Viserys. You could see the emotion on her. You could even see the emotion on Daemon. This is clearly an emotional moment for all of them. Sensing her hesitation, Daemon goes to her and talks to her and tries to get her, to do her duty. But she tells him in that language how hurt she really is in that moment. And she wonders if the birth of that baby, basically, I'm rewording what she said, but was it worth it? Really, was it worth it? Damon reminds her of her duty as both a princess and a daughter. He tells her basically, he needs you now more than he ever did. She's still hurt by this, but I think her sense of duty outweighed her emotions. So she walked up. Before she was about to give the order for Crixus to burn her mother's body, she looked over at her dad, and I think she just wanted her dad to look at her, to comfort her, to hold her hand, something. He refused to look back. You could see that was grief on top of grief. Not only did she lose her mother behind her brother, who I'm certain she loved. I'm certain she loved her brother, but she felt like she was about to be replaced by this brother. And she absolutely loved her mother. And now all she has left is her father. So she's looking to her father. It's complex emotions. Right? She's looking to her father, and her father refuses to look at her, to offer her any comfort, anything at all. And you could see the pain and the anger. So she quickly turns to Crixus and gives the order to burn the bodies. So of course, they move to the Privy Council. The Privy Council is now in need of an heir. They do not want Damon to be the heir because of what he did with the Night Watchman. And so he's like, what are you talking about? Like, what, like, who else could be the heir? There's no one else. And so the hand says Rhaenyra. The king, well, not just the king, but other members of the Privy Council, they're like, what? Huh? Who? No, it's a woman. This has never happened. They start talking about precedents. That basically what they're saying is, there's no law saying that a woman can't. It's just never happened. And because it's never happened, should we even do this? And so the king is like, dude, like, I've lost my wife. I've lost my baby. I've lost you. And you're talking to me about this? Is like, no, I don't want to do this to my brother. Like, nah, I trust him. He's not gonna, he's not gonna kill me, right? He's not gonna do that. It's just not gonna happen. So he walks out of the Privy Council meeting. That night, I guess I would only assume that it's that night. I'm skipping a part. So, Alicent, the hand's daughter, sees her dad, and she runs into her dad's arms, and she's clearly grief stricken. She knew the queen, and she's hurt because her friend is hurt. She knows her friend is hurt, right? So she runs to her father, who she knows is as close to that family as she is as close. They're both close to the family. You know what I'm trying to say. Runs to her father. She's looking for her father to console her, probably because she has tried to be as tough as possible, and at the same time dealing with the grief of the loss of her own mother, who recently died. The hand, Otto Hightower, basically says, how are you? How are you? How is the princess? I thought about your mother when all of this was happening, or as all of this was happening. And then he suggests, maybe you should see the king. Understanding what he's saying, she says, basically, in his chambers. And you're like, yeah, don't act like that. You know what this is. I'm like, wait, what? You know what this is. you know that your life was to be pimped this whole time. You know that, right? I love you, but nah, you're only here. You serve to get me ahead. That's it. Like, damn. Like, for real. Like, I don't know. And this is a child. This is a child. And this man has got to be at this point, like at least he looks to be in his 40s, maybe even his 50s. Right. So it's like, how could you do this to this child? Like, nah, let her live her life, man. But nah, he pimps her to the king and tells her to, go see the king. And on top of that, put on your mother's dress. You know that dress. That red one. No, it wasn't red. But and she goes to see the king. Now, what I thought was kind of smooth on her part was she wasn't trying to seduce him with her body. She was trying to seduce him with her mind. First, she started she brought a book. And of course, he's like, what are you doing? Why are you here? And then she gets into the whole thing of, my mother passed away, and everyone around me spoke in riddles when all I really wanted was someone to say, like, how are you, or something to that effect, like, are you okay, or something. And saying that, it was like it bridged the connection between the two of them. He was able to see that she is still in pain, in a similar kind of pain that he's in, and the two of them could use each other to get through their grief, their pain. But it kind of left there. But that was exactly what you were thinking in that moment. All right. So later that night, Damon goes to basically that brothel again. And while at the brothel, he proclaims his nephew king for a day. Now, of course, we don't hear him say those words because it's the king's hand that comes back to the Privy Council and announces, this is what your brother did. Of course, the king is livid, absolutely livid. Next thing we see, Damon in the throne room, and the king is like, nah. When you address me as your grace, nothing else. I'm not your brother, your grace. I am your king. Understand your place. And but really what he says is, did you say this? Did you say it? Of course, Damon didn't know. And then he gives him the rundown, and Damon tries to tell his story. What ends up happening is this. Damon says, basically, I wanted to be there for you. I wanted to be next to you. I wanted to be your brother. He's communicating without communicating it in words. He never wanted to be king. He wanted to be there with his brother. And in that moment, as I was listening to this, it kind of reminded me of something that my sister was telling me years later after I graduated from college. Right, I think at that time, either I was in my late 30s or early 40s. My sister was basically telling me, like, you went to college and you left me. You left me. And I'm just like, what do you mean? Like, this is a natural course of life. And I guess as an older brother, like, I never thought about her pain or what she would be thinking, or whatever. Like, nah, this is what's supposed to happen. I know this is supposed to happen because my uncles and aunts, they did this and they never spoke about this, so this is normal. And as my sister got older, my sister started to pull away from me. Right. It was natural. So in my mind, I'm not thinking anything of it. Like, it's just, whatever. It's life. But years later, my sister was like, nah, that hurt me. That hurt me to my core. I didn't know that. And I'm thinking the king is thinking the same thing too. Like, what are you talking about? Like, Nah. But what the king says is, how could I trust you? How could I trust you? Look at all the things that you do. And to which Damon says, you need me to protect you from you. Brother, you're weak. And as I stand, I absolutely know that's exactly how my sister looks at me. My sister looks at me as someone who's weak. But what my sister doesn't understand is it takes a lot of strength to deal with things. My sister just goes off at the mouth. The mouth doesn't prove anything at all. Doesn't prove anything. I might not say what I think. I might not say what I feel. But at the end of the day, I get what I want. Every single time, I get what I want. I might have to jump through some hoops. I might have to think about my strategy. And along the way, the very people that were giving me the pushback, they're the ones who respect me more because I didn't do all the things that I did or that I could have done. I worked in silence. I moved in silence. There's a lot of things that I do that, people don't know about. So I'm thinking about the interaction between the two of them. So thinking about my sister, thinking, yeah, this is something that my sister absolutely would say. And as a king or as a firstborn, let me say as a firstborn, your job is to protect not only you, not only your house, but also your siblings. And in order to do that, in order to do it perfectly, you've got to have a silver tongue. You've got to be diplomatic. And if you think about it, that's kind of why the monarchy is always based on firstborn, because your firstborn is the one who is always going to be the most willing to give to the family, the most willing to give of themselves in service of the family. They're the most willing to forego their own personal needs so that others can have. So, all of that made sense. All of that interplay made sense. But hearing his brother say that he was weak, that sent him on another level. He basically told him, you are no longer my heir. Of course I'm your heir. What are you talking about? Who else could be your heir? My daughter. My daughter is my heir. And right when the brother Damon goes to plead his case, like in a brotherly moment, his guards basically they move towards Damon like, nah, dude, we'll kill you. He understands. He reads the room and he's like, I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to. That's my brother. I love him. At the end of the day, no matter what's going on, let me back away. That's what he does, right? So he leaves. Next, the king, Viserys, he calls his daughter down into the crypt. He wants to test her. He asks her a simple question. Basically, what is it that you think about us, the Targaryens? What are your thoughts about us? And she basically says something to the effect of, a lot of people think that, we're godlike or next to godlike or something like that. But, without the dragons, we're just people just like anybody else. And that was what he needed to hear. He needed to hear that she was able to see both sides of things. Right. And he goes on to say that, basically to rule, you must understand balance. Basically, that's basically what he was saying. You must understand balance. He tells her she is his heir. Of course, she protests at first. She's like, nah, it's Damon. He's like, nah, it's you. So we cut to a scene, which must be, I don't know, days, weeks, months later. We cut to a scene where basically she's being coronated, and all of the lords of the seven kingdoms are professing their fealty again to the king and to his heir, Rhaenyra. They cut back to the scene at the crypt, and Viserys tells her more. He basically tells her that Aegon, one of the previous kings, foresaw the end of man, and it begins with a terrible winter. All of Westeros must stand together in order to stop winter from coming and the fall of man from coming. But in order for all of this to happen, a Targaryen must be king or queen of the Iron Throne. And basically, the episode ends there. Thank you for watching, listening. It has been a pleasure just talking to myself. Hopefully you find this of value.